The Suez Crisis is, as you know, major turning point in the history of the Middle East. And at the time, and during the, let's say, about 20 years after the Suez Crisis, a lot of things has been written about it. But the archive material was not available to most of those earlier writings on the Suez Crisis. Now it is available, and we can know much more about what was the backstage of the Suez Crisis. And plus, usually this crisis is seen from the point of view of the major powers, which the United States, Soviet Union, and the two Western powers that were directly connected with it, which was Britain and France. The standings of other European countries, and especially other colonial European countries like Portugal, usually is not known at all. For instance, nobody talks about this in Portugal. So what I did was to collect material from the Portuguese Foreign Archive on this crisis, which gives some hidden aspects of the Suez Crisis regarding the major superpowers, and also what was the point of view of the Portuguese government at the time, which was very closely watching what was going on in Suez, because it has much to do with the Portuguese interests in Africa. You know, when the Suez Crisis passed its 6th anniversary, nobody talked about it. There was no commemorations at all of the Suez Crisis, but this does not mean that this is no longer a current point, you know. On the contrary, the Suez Crisis is maybe one of the most important turning points of the history of the Middle East, because it's the point where the colonial powers, the old colonial powers disappeared and were replaced by the more or less permanent influence of the United States in the region. And it also is the starting point of the Arab nationalism, which is something that lasted only for the last 20 years, lasted only 20 years. You can say that after the late 1970s, the Arab nationalism was falling down. So the Suez Crisis is, let's say, the beginning of the modern Middle East. You cannot understand what happened in when you go to the Middle East today and you see all these stereotypes about religious fundamentalism, frontiers that are being put under revision, foreign influences. You can trace, you can link all these things to the major events that started in 1956. And because the Western powers are so involved in the Middle East today, they don't want to commemorate this starting point, which was the Suez Crisis. Portugal did not had a very direct role, a very small direct role, because it was part of an international organization that was trying to counter the Egyptian will to nationalize the Suez Canal. But what the Portuguese government wanted in the backstage of the crisis was the same that Britain and France wanted. Portugal wanted to contribute to overthrow the Egyptian government. Why? Because it was supposed to be one of the most powerful anti-colonial sources for all Africa. And so all the nationalist movements in Africa was either were getting support from Egypt, or the colonial governments thought they might have in the future support from the government of Egypt. So the government of Egypt was the mother of all evil for the colonial governments, and they all wanted to contribute to put him down.
Okay.